Okay, we're here at Silverstone with YouTube, and it's kind of like an impromptu collab with FP1 Will and Kireth myself. We're going to talk everything about Formula One, our honest opinions, because we've been chatting here on the balcony. YouTube invited us down. We've seen a sprint race. I was quite cynical about sprint races. You actually went to the very first sprint race here in 2021. Why don't we start on sprint races?
Sounds good.
I'll just set the scene a little bit. I think on TV, they can be very anticlimactic. But when you come to a circuit, and obviously not everyone comes to circuit, we've been invited, you get like a free race. But what's your perspective?
So this is the thing. As you mentioned, I went back to the very, very first sprint back in 2021 here. And that was obviously peak of Hamilton, Verstappen as well. It was a mega weekend.
Any battle between them in any format was like lightning. Yeah.
It was phenomenal. And we had no idea going into this what this was going to look like. The way I saw it going in was I thought I was going to get another practice session or two, and instead I'm getting a qualifying on a race. So I'll take it. And then we got it, and I feel like even though it's a boring race, from the trackside point of view, is mega.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. It's so different to what you see on TV. And anyone who is thinking about going to a race, I'm not going to say it's better, I'm going to say it's different. Because there are some things that are drawbacks. You don't quite get the whole picture of the race. And again, maybe that's why we think the sprints are better when we see it in person. But I really enjoyed it. And I think ever since, I've just had, I don't know, a bit of a soft spot for the sprints.
Your entry point was like through that.
Yeah, my comment section say otherwise. They slag me off for it all the time. But
Well,
I love it.
let me predict what our comment section say a little bit. So if I'm going to be a bit controversial, when you go to a track and you see racing, unless some tracks, maybe like Hungary or like Winnie Bowls, you sit by a corner and you see, and at the beginning it's really exciting because all the cars are together, apart from the Aston Martin. Well, the Aston Martins in the formation lap here fell off the back. But then it kind of spreads out, everyone kind of relaxes, phones go back in pocket, you kind of take it in, and then maybe near the end of the race, like you start to... So a sprint race, for me, is just about seeing cars kind of together. Like, it's just a little bit more of an exciting session, but it doesn't have to be a race. I don't have to, like, say this needs to be like an incredible race every time. That's my perspective.
The free wine helps as well.
Okay,
I tend to find it's handy.
Why don't we go on to regs then? I think that's the other big talking point at the moment, or the immediate one, which is clipping, which is battery management.
Yeah.
Let's just say artificial overtakes.
Sure.
I'm a self-confessed, unapologetic Formula E lover.
Oh.
I like the Peloton race. That makes sense to me because those batteries and those cars go the whole race, and it's all about regen and everything. This is adding a dimension of racing that I don't think anyone wants.
So Formula E,
people do.
I mean, I'm on the other side of the fence. Formula E. I'm seeing my first race this summer, so maybe that will change my perspective on it. I'm going to London. Yeah. So maybe that will change my perspective. I've always liked side-by-side racing, and when I was watching Australia, and I was watching the cars side by side, I was half asleep at the beginning of that race. I was very wide awake by lap 5. Admittedly, it then died down after that. But
You fundamentally like seeing cars side by side.
I like seeing cars side by side. And I think Matt and Tommy were doing a podcast and they were talking about it earlier. I like it when they're side by side going to a corner. It's not just easy overtakes. A bit like what we were saying with DRS a few years ago, where sometimes they make the DRS zone way too long and the car would just breeze by and that was it. Whereas if you've got actual side by side action, that's what we want to see. You think back to, was it Zandvoort? I'm trying to remember which two drivers it was that went side by side through the first half of the lap.
Yeah.
I want to say it was Arnoux and somebody, but I might be completely wrong. But that was phenomenal. And that's the racing we're here for. That is racing, let's be honest. So while I get the downsides of the regs, and I understand that, I think you've got to look back at the negatives of this, and you look at, say, Suzuka and Bearman's accident. We don't want that at all, because that's dangerous, and that's...
And that really prompted all the changes.
Yeah. So maybe there's a middle ground.
And we almost saw a massive crash here between, looked like Russell and Verstappen.
We did.
I think it was Verstappen chopping, or one of them was chopping across, and looked like they were clipping at the same time.
Yeah.
And
it's the closing spaces that you want to avoid. So at the end of the day, these regulations, I'm not saying they're a good thing, because they're not.
Yeah.
We need to fix them, and it's good that Formula One seem to have a plan to fix them. That being said, there are positives to it. It's nice to see good racing from time to time. And I get that's a controversial take.
Yeah,
but
I disagree. I think because of my background in racing and the racing I've had and the championships I've won and lost, and knowing I've raced a lot of spec karts, so we're in spec machinery.
Right.
And then I understand Formula E because it's actually so in depth about the regeneration, and if you regenerate so well during the race, it pays massive dividend at the end. Whereas here it seems to be. This is a bad example, Silverstone. The battery seems Hamilton's battery just like was gone. You can never get it back basically. I feel like we were robbed a little bit of a fight between Hamilton and Anthony, and I wouldn't mind if the Mercedes just fastened Hamilton, so that's how it works. But I feel like at least I can understand the fair footing. But that's just my perspective, I guess. Kind of like maybe be imagining if I was a driver in this.
Yeah, so you've got the driving experience. I've got, I mean, as the physique shows, the experience of sitting on the sofa watching the race. So I mean, from that point of view, I just want to see cars side by side and having action, and that's why I am I'll show a little bit more warmth to these regs than most people do. I'm not saying they're a good thing by any means. I think there are a lot of things we need to fix about them, as I've mentioned, but there are positives. I think it's important that we look at that as well.
Let's talk noise.
Okay.
Because we're sat here trackside on the Wellington Straight. We were talking about, I mentioned that being here when there were double diffusers, I would just be like every lap, every car. It doesn't even matter what's happening on track, just love it. I'm astonished about how this is my first time seeing the 26 red cars. I'm astonished by how quiet they are. Like,
did you not hear any of the turbo hybrid before?
I mean, I've seen all I've seen cars every year.
Okay.
But I'm surprised that.
You thought this was quiet since the last year?
To be fair, I haven't sat this close.
I would have said
this was. Close, I'm like,
I would have said this was ever so slightly louder than last year, but it's not the whole blowing your ears out that you would have had in like the V8s, the V10s. V10s, like if you ever go to Goodwood, and we were talking this earlier, you hear a V10, you know about it.
So my comparison, when I was young, a few times I got to come here for like exhibitions and things, and sitting in the grand and on the back of the grand, coming in through the gate, and you can hear something that sounds like a Vulcan bomber or something, and you feel it and you feel the ground shake, and you go up and it feels like the grandstand shaking, and people there with earmuffs. And if you tried to be there without earplugs, you couldn't. You would physically have to leave.
You don't get that anymore.
But we could have a chat about that, ironically. So what's your? I think I interrupted. What's your take on it? Like pros and cons on?
I always like the screaming V10s or the V8s, and I think the moment they switched away from that, we lost a bit of Formula One. A part of that maybe is the fact that I was brought up on that. I think it'd be very interesting if we jump forward, say 5 or 6 years, when the people that grew up in that 2014 turbo hybrid era of Formula One, and whether they care about it as much. I think that's something that really interesting.
Or your first season you got into was Hamilton 21.
Yeah, exactly. Will they give as much of a damn? Because it's always sounded like that for them. I mean, in my case, I keep thinking back to those V10s.
And we were watching on TV, I assume, a lot. It was different TV. It wasn't high definition. The audio was a big part of that.
Well, one of my genuinely earliest memories is being sat when F1 took over London in I think it was 2005, and I was too short. I was sat on my dad's shoulders, and even then I couldn't see over the crowds.
Street one.
Yeah. And I couldn't see a thing, but I could hear it, and that stuck with me. So the sound is different now. It's nowhere near what it was. What I will say, and it's again a completely different tier to where the V10s and V8s were. The Audi, for whatever reason, we both mentioned this, the Audi sounds really good trackside.
TV.
No, you don't notice it trackside. Oh, sorry, you don't notice it on TV. Trackside, the Audi, it's got such a nice growl to it. It really does sound quite nice. But it's not a V10, and that's what we need back.
So my take on it is that, and again, I'm a self-confessed Formula E enjoyer. I love going to Formula E.
You can't talk about sound and then you go about Formula E. Come on.
Okay, but again, from a driver's perspective, I love hearing the tyres and hearing the curb stuff.
Sure.
We should meet up again. I should be in London as well.
Okay.
And get your hot take on Formula E in London.
I'll be there.
But so I feel like the experience here, especially what we're having now, this is very nice.
Yeah.
A few times I've been also treated to hospitality at football. It's a very similar experience, and the sport you're watching becomes a bit more transferable.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was arresting, it seized you, and I think it made us a level of fan that I'm a fan of Formula One in a different level of any other sport. I mean, we can just hear something there.
That's the Formula 2 cars going around.
Yeah, that you could actually pop in the back of the straight. Maybe we'll do one more point. Maybe I've put a few out there. Anything that is into hot topic in Formula One, drivers, Aston?
I think we've talked all about the regs. What about drivers? If there's a driver that you think is not going to be in Formula One next year,
Ocon.
Who's your hot? I was going to say Ocon. Yeah. Okay. Let's stick with Ocon then. Let's stick with Ocon. who's replacing him? Because that's the more interesting question. I think there's 3, maybe 4 names, but 3 names definitely that come to mind for me.
Beganovic in there?
Beganovic
Yeah.
is not one of my 3. You see, I would have gone Tsunoda.
Can I just say very quickly?
Go for it.
I think if Hamilton was having a terrible season here, then I would think Bearman up. But that's not going to happen now.
And that might have been what saved Ocon, but I don't think it will now. I think they will maintain. I mean, I've been saying this for a while, though I don't think I believe it anymore. Back in February, I was chatting to, we'll call it a third party, who had links to the Bearman camp, and they suggested that Bearman would not be in Haas next year. That being, at that point,
last year.
Yeah, well, it was before this season anyway. We hadn't seen this Hamilton resurgence that we're in now. I don't think that will happen anymore. But
so you got names that you think are gonna.
Yeah, I've got names that I think will end up alongside Bearman now if he decides, and I think he probably will now stay. Tsunoda's my first one. Second one, Fornaroli. He's done a lot of testing for McLaren recently. Obviously, F2 champion last year. Currently without a drive basically anywhere.
Yeah.
Haas have then picked him up and are very interested by the looks of things. And then the third one is Rafa Câmara, currently in Formula 2. Probably has just absolutely ruined the audio on this video clip.
Fast track him.
And I do worry if they fast track him because I don't think he's the complete article yet. I think he's shown really good signs of a very strong Formula 1 driver, but I think he needs another year.
Can I just note something there? If you go with Bearman and Câmara, Haas have never. Well, they have.
It was the Mick Schumacher-Mazepin season.
But since then,
Bearman will be in his 3rd year of Formula 1.
He's no longer.
You could argue 4th in a sense because he had that year where he was on and off for Ferrari and Haas. So I think we need to stop thinking about Bearman as a rookie. We were talking about him as a potential Ferrari driver a minute ago. So we can't think of him as a rookie anymore. We've got to think of it as, okay, now he's had that time to learn under Ocon. This is the point where he can make the step up and have a go at leading that team. And I think, if anything, that's an even better audition for Ferrari compared to what we're seeing right now. Can he take a team and lead it with a more junior driver beneath him?
And then finally, how would you summarise Ocon's career? Obviously, he's not one of these ultra-rich drivers that's come through. He's had, and he was on the verge of, when he left Alpine, like he was done.
Yeah.
How would you actually summarise his career?
Well, bear in mind, he lost his drive to Lance Stroll, of all people, long before the Alpine seat came along. So
and that was very controversial. Very highly
incredibly
rated
controversial. Yeah. I think considering where he started and the challenges that I know he's spoken about as well, and how hard it is to get to Formula 1, I think he's done a really good job. And he's got that win, and you can never take that away from him. And you could argue, okay, did Bottas's bowling experience, play a role in that? Yes, it did. And you can't tell me that had that not happened, Ocon would have won that race, because he wouldn't have done.
But someone needed to win it.
But
and he was that driver.
He took over the lead of that race from like lap 3 or 4, and he held it. And under intense scrutiny from those behind, he did a very good job. And I think that's what we need to remember Ocon as. He's been around Formula 1 for 10 years now. He's not going to be the same driver he was. He's past his peak. But he's had some very good results. He's had some very strong podiums. And I think, we shouldn't forget that. As much as, this is very ironic coming from me, the amount of Ocon jokes I think I've made this year. But I think it is important that we remember that as well.
I think, like your wine, I think he's going to mature in the memory.
Yeah, I can confirm. It won't have lasted long enough, I'm afraid. But
all right, hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you could hear it, because it's, like I said, very impromptu. We might both be at London for Formula E, which is going to be your first time.
Yeah.
And if so, I definitely want to catch up there and get your thoughts on that. But put any thoughts in the comments, and see you next time.